Hey everyone, welcome back to Beat the Sheet, an Xbox Game Pass challenge. The only podcast aiming to complete every single one of the 491 titles that have been made available on Xbox Game Pass since the start of 2020. As always, I'm your host Andy Wood and I'm joined by my co-host Josh.
I, against all the odds, remain Josh.
Surprising, real surprising there. So, on this week's show, we squad up in Star Wars Squadrons. We find out if Empire of Sin is a win or a bin. And Josh's favourite game of the last generation finally comes to Xbox and to Game Pass.
Oh, this is very exciting, isn't it? There we go. Finally get to talk about my favourite game of the generation, Empire of Sin. Fantastic. It's about time.
Josh, just famous lover of the Prohibition era. He finally gets his wish in this game.
God, I love it. Me and Capone. Can't wait.
Exactly. So how you doing this week, Josh?
Oh, I'm okay. Obviously, Empire of Sin is not my favourite game of the generation. I hate to break your hearts. It's Undertale, and I got to play it again for the purposes of re-reviewing it because any excuse. And yeah, I still like it. I don't think there's much in the way of a spoiler that a game I regarded as the best of the past 10 years is still pretty damn good. But yeah, still a great game. Looking forward to talking about that one.
No, that's fair. It's been a good week over here. It's been nice to finally have an excuse to play it because, you know, as with most games I buy on my Nintendo Switch, I kind of buy them and then go, well, I'm never going to play that. And then, yeah, it comes to Game Pass and I finally have an excuse. So yeah, been a good week. But yeah, I guess we've got quite a lot of games to get through this week. So let's just roll straight into it.
Let's do it. Okay. There have been 3 new additions to the Xbox Game Pass service this week, and they are Empire of Sin, Star Wars Squadrons, available as part of EA Play on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, and Undertale. You like my new disclaimer I threw in there? It's nice. Good stuff, right? Anyway, what do you make of these 3 new additions?
Yeah, I mean, you know, not a bad week, I guess. Undertale is very much technically a day one title to Game Pass, since it's somehow never been on Xbox until now, which completely blows my mind. Squadrons, you know, that's not been out long. I think that dropped in November last year, right? So that's a pretty snappy turnaround to be free for people. And Empire of Sin is a game. So there you go. You got 3 games. Pretty good week.
I mean, Empire of Sin's helped be made by John Romero, he of Doom fame. So I mean, unfortunately, it's no Doom, but you know, it's just a pretty cool list. You got Empire of Sin. Empire of Sin was always a game I was interested in, but never wanted to pay actual money for. So it's a perfect Game Pass game. And, you know, Star Wars Squadrons, I did pay money for that. I don't even know why, but nonetheless, I did. So finally had an excuse to play that. And yeah, Undertale, man. I thought as well that was already on Xbox. So I was also taken aback by the fact it had never been on the platform before. But very cool that it finally is. It's on everything now, I think. It's on its way to being the game of all platforms, which is where it should be, on everything. It should have a Dreamcast port in the works if I had my way.
That's fair. I would make that just so it happens. That sounds like a good time. You could do some great stuff with the little VMU memory card on a Dreamcast and Undertale. You'd have a great time.
God, you could.
Yeah.
You get like text messages from Dr. Alphys for the VMU. That is so cool. Yeah, let's Toby Fox, if you're listening, and I know you are, hit us up. We'll take care of it. It's fine. It's fine. I have no coding experience, but I'll just be happy to be working on it. So it'll be a good time. It'll be fun.
Yeah, definitely. But anyway, I guess Undertale's probably coming up a bit later on. So should we open this up with some Empire of Sin thoughts then?
Yeah, Empire of Sin. Now this is a weird game, isn't it? Because here's the straight dope on the Empire of Sin. It's absolute trash, and yet I kind of quite like it. That's the best way I could describe this game. It fails almost on every single level, and yet I find myself wanting to play it more than any other game probably come out this year. I find myself strangely addicted to it, and I can't quite pinpoint why. I don't know if you've had a similar kind of experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really have. I mean, you know, we have quite a snappy turnaround for these new editions sometimes. You know, they drop on a Thursday, and we usually look to record. You know, we're recording 3 days later, so it's a fast-paced thing. And sometimes you think, right, I'm gonna dive into this game. You know, put a few hours into it, just figure out everything about it, so I can talk about it on the show. Yeah, Empire of Sin just kind of stole the last 2 days off me. I've just been captivated by this largely garbage game. Like I just played it for hours until I took over the entire like empire of sin in the game. It was crazy. But I guess we should briefly kind of talk about what this actually is. So Empire of Sin is basically it's a strategy game with some Gears tactics / kind of XCOM combat. And the goal in the game is to pretty much take over the city of, I think it's Chicago this is set in, right?
It is Chicago, yeah.
Yeah.
Chicago.
So yeah, you're taking over the city of Chicago in the Prohibition era. So you're a mobster and you're running, brothels and speakeasies, and you've got to like get breweries to illegally make the booze and stuff. And yeah, the idea is that, it's you against 9 or 10, or I think you can do a couple more different factions. And you're basically just trying to, muscle them out of the city so that you can take it over. So, I mean, first of all, I love the angle. I think that's a really cool idea for a game. It's something that hasn't been done enough. I think, it's an idea that should have a few games based on it, and there's really not that many. So, very much happy this exists. The only issue is, and as we've already said, it's a bit trash. I just think almost all of the strategy layer of this game doesn't work. is the main problem. Like, it kind of opens up and it's quite promising. You do a pretty basic tutorial, which changes a little bit depending on which character you choose to play as, and that kind of teaches you, the basics of, well, simply enough that you need buildings like brothels and speakeasies to make some money. You need a brewery so that you can supply alcohol to those places to get people coming in and get people spending money. And yeah, you just have to capture these places and defend them, upgrade the security on them so your guards defend them from enemies. And yeah, just do that to take over the whole town, which, it's a good basic gameplay loop. It that works at least. The only problem is that any interaction with the other factions just doesn't really go anywhere in this game. You kind of just, after like an initial small bit of trouble very early on, you just become completely dominant in this game to the point where all the other factions are just nuisances that you have to slowly, methodically destroy across like the about 10 hours it takes to win a game. That was my experience anyway. I mean, I don't know how you've found it.
No, I kind of felt a similar thing. Empire of Sin made me believe that if I was in 1920 Chicago, I myself could have become a crime lord, because clearly it's not that difficult, at least if anything to go by here, because you start off as just one dude. I was the Irish guy, and it took all of 5 seconds for somebody to call him a Paddy and somebody else to call him a Mick. And I was like, well, there we go. We're straight in with the stereotypes. Fantastic. And from there on, all I did was hire 2 people. I just took over the town, and it was that simple. I couldn't even believe it. But it is a fantastic setting for a video game, and it kind of nails the feel of it as well. You hear little bits of jazz playing in and out of the soundtrack, and the little bits of the clubs you go into. The decor kind of matches. The world itself feels suitably 1920s America. All the stereotypes, and the game is just riddled with stereotypes. It's playful stereotyping. It's not offensive anyway. And, there's just all the stereotypes of there which you'd want them to be from different countries and different backgrounds. And everyone's strangely fat. I don't really know why. It's just an interesting little setting for a video game. But as you say, it's the strategy elements of it kind of falls flat on its face almost instantly, because combat's incredibly simple. Your main guy will have a special attack which basically bludgeons the entire room. Doesn't matter what you just beat half the room before you even need to think about doing anything else. And then it's just a case of just picking people off one by one, and that's it for 10 hours. That's all you're going to do. There's nothing. The only time it gets a little bit trickier is when you go to the safe houses of the crime lords themselves, because they actually have the brains to put more than 2 people on security, and it's stacked full with like 10 or 12 people to kill. That actually requires a bit of strategy, but most of the time, you're just walking around the city, going from building to building, just knocking on the door, killing some folk, and then just saying, I run you now. And it's an engaging loop, but it's not exactly a difficult one to manage.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, like the idea of it makes sense, you kind of declaring war with the different factions, you go and take over their places, they'll occasionally, infrequently come and take over some of yours. They tend to do that in bursts. I don't know if you found that, but like I'd be in a war with someone and nothing would happen. And then all of a sudden I'd get about 20 notifications saying they were attacking my guards and going into places. And then it just disappear again after that. So that was kind of weird. But yeah, the main goal really is, you just take over these places. As you do more of that, there's a little meter that fills up to kind of show how close you are to locating that boss's safe house. And then once that fills, you go to the safe house and kill him, basically. So I think the issue is that there's no kind of like, the game kind of shows that it's got all these different layers where you can make trade agreements with the different mob bosses. You can team up with them to go to war against other people. You can make like a standing order, so you give them like alcohol every month for money. You can make defense packs. There's all this kind of level of detail where you're going to like kind of play them all off against each other to rise to the top, like you would do in a game like one of the Sid Meier's Civilization games. But the problem is that the way to beat everyone is literally just to ransack these crappy little places they have until the game tells you can go to their safe house and then blow their face off. So that's how you have to win. You can't win by just slowly moving your way up the ladder financially. You basically do have to murder all the other people anyway to win. So it just, I don't know, like it feels like they've nearly got a good kind of tactical game there. Maybe it just needed another like half a year in the kind of, for them all to think it through or something. But instead, it's just come out with this thing which has the tactical layer, but really is just a very simple XCOM tactics game. Really, that's the main thing you have to do.
Yeah, there's not much here, to be honest with you. You do meet up and try to form packs with other mob bosses, but you don't really have to. You can kind of ignore them all just endlessly. I went to war with one person and I couldn't be bothered to finish him off. And he just messaged me every other day saying, "Hey, guy, can I have a truce, please?"
Yeah.
And I was just like, "I'll get back to you." And nothing ever happened. He just kind of accepted it, which I kind of enjoyed. It was quite a fun moment. But a lot of the time that does happen. There's no real consequences to your actions. You can just take over large swathes of a territory, not attacking anybody, and nobody really seems to care. They might go, "Will you stop?" And I'll say, "Well, here's $4,000, go away." And then they're happy until I've taken them over and I've stole all their businesses again. So it's pointless in the long run. The money system in this game is a little bit weird. Because at the start of the game, you don't have anywhere near enough and you're kind of struggling to get going. But once you do get going, you do have things rolling in, all of a sudden money just becomes meaningless in this game. Not because you have too much, but because you're taking other things so regularly. But there's no point upgrading security. A security upgrade costs about $2,000. And you get very little noticeable benefit. Improving the ambience of the place costs about $2,500. And you'll get a 7% increase in money, which will take about 92 weeks to break even. So why would you even bother? You just leave it. You just get these crappy little buildings. You own enough of them that they'll all turn in a small profit. And then you just carry on with the game as it is. Security, you may lose the odd fight, but who cares? You can go win it back in 5 seconds. Like, it's really not that difficult to just win it back. They can't take all of them. You've got 700 buildings. Like, there's only so much they can do.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, I found that, like, once I reached the halfway through my time with the game, I basically just spent any money I got into hiring new people to fight for me. Cause you kind of, there's a big list. It's kind of, the game frames it as like a black book of like contacts of people you can get to fight for you. And you can have a maximum of 10. And like by the time you get to the end of the game, you're probably going to want to bring about 7 or 8 people with you, because then you can just really just go to town on everyone. You'll just, you'll win every battle if you've got a good group of people. So I just end up spending all my money on that because I'm not going to waste my time upgrading this building that I've got no attachment to, because I just, I spent the last half an hour taking over like 15 new buildings. Like I don't care. Like early on, I was really careful about my buildings for the first kind of hour, but once you start taking over people, you lose any sort of sense of attachment to them, and that kind of fades away. And then I think another thing that really holds this game back is that, so I had my first big war in this game, and there's like a strength meter you can see on the faction page that shows you how strong the different players in the game are. And, you start at something like 100,000. Let's just say that everyone's 100,000. And if you win a big war and take someone over, you suddenly jump up to like 200 to 250,000. And in my game, none of the other factions got anywhere. They all just stayed around the 100,000 mark for the whole game. So like none of them are showing enough ambition to actually like drive other factions out of the game and take them over, because that's how this game should work. That's how a Sid Meier's Civ game would work. You're all doing a bit of diplomacy early on, and then by the end of the game, you've got like 2 or 3 huge factions because they've took over everyone else. Whereas in this game, it almost feels like they all kind of just sit there and just wait for you to kill them. There's no real drive. They might like ransack 1 building or 2 buildings off someone else, but like even when it says the other factions go to war, there's no drama to it. They just kind of like prod each other on the shoulder a few times, and then they go, oh well, truce, that was a good fight there. Like, it just doesn't work. You need someone else to really start pushing you to the limit, to have a real war, and you just don't get that. So yeah, it kind of just falls a bit flat, really. I mean, all this told me about conquering an entire city in this era is, just get about 8 lads and just walk to every single mob building and just say, I'm having this, and that's it. Like, you're done. You don't need to do any there's no conniving, there's no need for that. Just literally walk in and be like, nah, I'm having this, and that's it for 10 hours. It's
pretty mad, isn't it? It gives you the impression that a group of lads at all bar one could take over the entirety of Leeds, and the chances are they could. If this game is to be believed, it's as simple as this. But this is it. This is the point. There's no consequences. There's no all the layers to this game. There's a lot. You can hire advisors. You can make people underbosses. You can have moles to go in undercover and infiltrate gangs. You can do all this stuff. You can brew different types of alcohol. You can change. You can make everything what you want it to be, but it doesn't really matter. You don't need to. There's no incentive to it. It's actually just a waste of time. You're better off just going door to door and shooting folk. And incredibly enough, that's quite engaging in its own stupid way. I quite like conquering the entire city of Chicago with little to no effort. And that's why I've kind of enjoyed doing it for the past 3 days. In its own way, it's kind of engaging. Occasionally, there's some funny kind of dialogue. Occasionally, your team members will get drunk. I got one guy who was just slobbing around. And 5 minutes later, he went, through his sheer force of will, he's become sober now. And I'm like, oh, well, that was a scary 5 minutes. And you just move on again, like nothing matters. Yeah. It's just totally bizarre. There's missions you can do. And I've not done a single mission in this game. I seem to be completing some, but I don't actively go and try and do any missions. I'm just going door to door. And I'm assuming that's enough to win. And it feels like it is.
It is.
I feel like there's meant to be an overarching story, but I'm not engaging with it. I'm just killing folk. It's an utterly bizarre game. And yet, again, for whatever reason, I find it oddly compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the box ticking of it, right? It's like, here's a big city, you can take it all over. Like, just going around and like wiping out faction by faction, like that on its own is enough to carry a game that isn't really any good. And that's kind of what you've got here. Like, none of the pieces work. There's some interesting ideas that I haven't mapped out. As you said, there's a lot of kind of depth hidden away under there. It just ends up being completely inconsequential. I mean, even with the characters you hire for your group, there's a ton of depth. Like, different mobsters, they like people and don't like other people. I've had like people in my team sort of like fall in love in the middle of us going around ransacking everyone, and then if one of them gets injured, the other one like runs away from the battle or gets angry. I had one fight where the other mob boss had one of my mobster's friends in his team, so they said, he literally won't shoot that person because they're friends. It's all there. There's all this depth, and yet it's kind of just it feels like it's for a different game. It's like they're making this other game and that one isn't ready, so we've just got this knock on the door and ransack everyone shooting game to play while we wait for that game to be finished. I don't know, it's really weird.
And you may be thinking at this point, but what about the police? And I too spent the entirety of Empire Sin going, does anybody from the police want to stop me doing this? Because nobody ever did. Occasionally somebody would go up to me and go, I don't know if you should be doing this. And I'd just go, oh, fuck off, mate, in my stereotypical Irish accent. And he'd just go, oh, well, fair enough. And we'd move on and we'd be happy. I was never ransacked by the FBI, despite this being Prohibition era. And that's kind of the entire point of this era, is that you were going to be ransacked. It never happened. Nobody seemed to bother. It might happen occasionally, but then you just take it over again and rebuild it. It's like, there's no point. It takes literally no effort to take things back again. There's no consequences to your actions at all in Empire of Sin. It's a horrible morality tale, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had the same thing. I mean, the kind of tutorial of my game, because I think each character again has a slightly different tutorial. Mine kind of had a bit where the police took over this brewery that I had, and it was completely scripted for the sakes of teaching me about the game. And like, they're trying to push at that point, like, oh, like there's a skill you can get up in each building, which is like, it's meant to make your business like, harder for the police to figure it out what you're doing and make it less detectable. And early on, I'm thinking, oh, better get that up because, I don't want one of these raids to happen like what just happened in the tutorial. And then by the end, I didn't level that up once. I must have about 70 brothels that didn't have any effort towards hiding what they were. And just not a single raid. Nobody cared. There's an achievement in this game for bribing the police. I had the money, but they never wanted a bribe. Like, I'd like the achievement, but they don't want it. They haven't even noticed that I have about 250 casinos in this town. Like, just please go in one so I can get an achievement. It's so weird. Such a weird game because, again, I actually found this compelling. I spent about 6 hours straight playing this one day over the last few days. Like, I just wanted to keep going around that town and taking it over. Like, it really did drag me in, but I don't think there's much redeemable about it at all.
No, and it makes it sound like we think the combat is entertaining, but it isn't. It's actually really boring. It's really tedious to do. Obviously it plays very similar to an XCOM game, but it has none of the intricacies of it, really. I mean, all you're getting is percentage points to shoot people. And it has the ridiculous thing that a lot of these games do, where you've got somebody with a shotgun stood a meter away from somebody, and he somehow misses. And you just go, what the hell is this? And that just infuriates me in these sort of titles. And that happens occasionally, but it doesn't matter, because my main dude's just going to whack somebody over the head with a hockey stick in 5 seconds time for the 8th time in 5 minutes, and that'll be that.
The leader skills are absolutely just obnoxiously powerful. I mean, so like each turn in this game, one character is going to basically shoot. They're going to shoot one bullet at someone if they've got a pistol or something. And my leader's special skill thing was that he would just unload his entire clip around the room. So like if he killed someone, he just shoots the next one. So like at the start of every battle, I just kill about 5 people with one move, and it completely skews the rest of the game. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm happy for it to be pretty breezy and simple, because I don't want a slow, difficult version of this game's combat. It's not interesting enough. But yeah, again, just ideas that haven't quite been thought out well enough.
I think in maybe 2 years' time, after a series of updates, you could have a fantastic version of this game. But it isn't that now, and though I wouldn't say don't play it, I would say that your mileage will very much vary on this one. I quite enjoyed it, despite the fact knowing it was trash. But I've played about 270 Game Pass titles at this point. So I've developed a thick skin for any level of trash. Maybe other people just play this and go, what the hell is this? So yeah, it's not a strong recommendation, but it might be worth checking out, even against itself and against all better judgment. There is fun to be had here.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's just one of those games where if you do end up getting into it, and you feel like you want to take over the city, it kind of just gives you that baseline level of enjoyment for about 7 or 8 hours. There's no spikes. You're not going to be like, that was really exciting and fun, but it's just like 8 hours of just contentment is what you'll get from this game. You just take over the town. It's all really simple. There's no real trouble. Everyone else sucks. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm the same. I give it some kind of a recommendation, but I'm definitely not telling you it's a good game. Like, I think if I'm scoring this out of 10, I really can't go higher than a 5. I want to, but I can't. It's not well put together.
Yeah, I'd also say this is looking like a 5 for me. It's not a fantastic game. I'll say the console controls for something like this are okay. They're just about fine. There's a few too many menus where I was just dying for a mouse to just click through them quickly and simply. But it works and it's functional. That's Empire Sin, really. It works and it's functional. And if by the end of playing it, you think you can take over whatever hometown you live in, just find yourself a couple of dudes. You'll be there in a second. Easy.
Yeah, that's all you do. A couple of lads just barge into any business you see and say it's yours, and you're done. Job done.
Okay, let's move on to our next title, which is Star Wars Squadrons. Now, this is EA's latest ever in the Star Wars franchise, and this one focuses entirely on getting into the cockpit of an X-Wing or a TIE fighter, or whatever the hell else the other ones are called, and flying around the galaxy, blowing people up. That sounds like an incredibly fun time. Yeah. And yet, I found most of the time with Star Wars Squadrons to be unrelentingly boring. I don't know if you found the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I love Star Wars spaceship games, going back to like the Rogue Squadron series on the N64 and the GameCube. And then even there was some kind of lesser spin-offs of that, like Star Wars Starfighter, which I think was on PS2 and Xbox. Like, just put me in a fast Star Wars spaceship, have me doing like missions where I'm, over a big city or planet, doing different stuff. All great. Love it. Star Wars Squadrons, as you said, it somehow manages to make that boring, which is not an easy thing to do. And realistically, the way it does that is, I think there's two things here. One is that every mission just takes place in space. There's no fun missions where you're like on above the surface of a planet. It's all space. And I mean, the other issue kind of comes from that, which is that because it's all in space, everything just feels really sluggish. Like there's no exciting sense of speed to this game. It's just a bunch of moving around in space slowly, not being able to see anything because you have to use a cockpit view, which I'm sure some people are thrilled about. I know, these games have their fans of people, people want to be right in the cockpit, seeing what you would see if you were the pilot, but not for me. I don't feel like you can see enough of the game. So yeah, I mean, again, yeah, it takes what I think should be an easy win and kind of fluffs it a bit, really.
It's possibly the strangest criticism you can make about a game set in space, that there's too much space. And I'm very aware of the fact that that is a little bit incongruous, but there is too much space. All you do in this game is fly around perfectly gorgeous looking planets, but they are just backdrops to just the endless blackness and the odd asteroid floating about, and you just shoot some dudes. As you say, in space, you can't pick up velocity. You can hit the turbo boost button on this, and I don't really feel like I'm going any quicker. Like, the only time you really notice it is when you're trying to specifically gun down areas of like a Star Destroyer, and all of a sudden you realize you're flying straight into it much quicker than you thought you were. That's kind of amusing, I suppose. But most of the time, you don't get that sense of speed. You don't feel like you're in a high-octane dogfight. You just feel like you're kind of milling about a little bit, just going pew, 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 and some things in the distance go die. And that's fine, but the lack of variety in the locales kills this game dead. It starts off with a pretty good tutorial where you are flying in and around a couple of different things into these different cities and flying through caves and whatnot. And it was kind of exciting. And I thought, okay, cool, we're going to have this for 12 missions. And then they just never did it again. And it was just absolutely killer for me because by 4 or 5 missions in, I was so unrelentingly fed up of playing Star Wars Squadrons, and it just never picked itself back up.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, it's like I said, with those other games, with your Rogue Squadrons and stuff, the best missions in those games, you're not in space. The best missions in those games are stuff like doing the Battle of Hoth, like you're on the surface, you're flying around, but you're fighting things on the surface. There'll be some ties in the air as well, I'm sure, that you're shooting down, but that's where flying games are exciting. They're not exciting in just the vacuum of space. And this game just insists on sticking with that. And it's a shame as well, because there is some real positives here. I think the way they've decided to kind of handle the way you control the ships is quite interesting. It's a lot more simulation than arcade, but they actually have like levels in this game. So you're flying your X-Wing around and you have to set a computer to say if you want your power to like all be in the lasers or the engines or the shields. You can say if you want to like put all of the power into the front or the back shields. There's some really actually quite interesting strategy with that. If you're kind of going head on into a big Star Destroyer, you can put all the power in your shields to kind of withstand that force and then maybe switch it to your weapons to do some real damage when you get close. Like that's quite cool. And I haven't really seen that in, that isn't in the more arcadey flying games. So that's nice as well. And I think even just the sense of scale when you do get something big like a Star Destroyer in this game is pretty great. Like the game has you, specifically targeting parts of that ship to take it down. You're taking out its engines or its shields before you bombard it to kind of finish it off. That's great. That's like a level of scale that you don't really see in too many of these kind of space games. So it does have things it does well, but it just doesn't get you past that overarching sense of just boredom, to be honest. I mean, I love Star Wars and I just wanted this to end, like simply enough. I just didn't really want to play it.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling, isn't it? Because the actual ships themselves are very well designed. When you are sat in the cockpit, you can look around and you can see all the cool little Star Warsy bits and bobs. And that's kind of fun. It feels authentic. It feels like something that's been lovingly crafted. As you say, the control system is pretty deep in parts. It's not a simple arcade shooter. You do have to think about what you're doing. It's perhaps a little bit too deep for me personally. I would rather this as an arcade flight game, but it's perfectly playable in this sense. It makes you think about what you're doing more, and certainly for the multiplayer suite, which, let's be honest, this game is more focused on anyway. It'll definitely make more exciting multiplayer battles, but for the single player, it's just a repetitive slog of doing very similar things in every single mission. And as seems to be just the doctrine of Star Wars these days, you have to play as both the good side and the bad side.
Yeah.
And I hate this because it makes for terrible storytelling. And Star Wars Squadrons tells an awful story. There's very little going on, really. You just seem to be fighting over one crappy bit of junk, and neither side's particularly happy about it. And you flip between the two of them, and they give out exposition in the strangest way for a AAA video game where you do dialogue. You just start in a stationary screen, and you do like a point and click choose of who you want to speak to. And then you move away again. And it's very odd. It's hard to describe it. It's just literally stationary screens where you move between each of them to talk to a few people. And then you go into your plane and fly out. It's not particularly interactive. It's very flat, is what I'd describe it as. It has no real oomph to it, as long with the fact your lead character just never speaks for no apparent reason, despite the fact they do have a voice. It's the sodding Metro situation all over again. They have a voice, they've got a voice actor, but they don't want to write any bloody dialogue for them, and I don't understand it.
No, it's absolutely baffling. I just don't get it. And as you said, the way they tell the story is pretty much a mess. I mean, this game has no logical reason for you playing as the bad guys in the story, except for the fact that they wanted to put you in a TIE fighter. That's it. Like, I mean, people had a lot of kind of negatives to say about the story in Star Wars Battlefront 2, which kind of did a similar thing. You played the good and the bad side, but you didn't really play the bad side. It's kind of, it at least had something more to it than this. All the missions where you play as the Empire in this game, you're just a dick. Like, there's no narrative reason for those to exist in the story. Really, the story is like, you're clearly the good guys in this story, and then you also just happen to play missions as the bad guys to kind of see what they're up to between finding you and trying to fight you again. It's just, it's weird. It doesn't feel necessary. It's really clearly just there because, the story in this game is just a preparation for the multiplayer suite. So, they probably wanted to put you in the seat of all the different ships before you got to the multiplayer.
Oh, that's pretty much it, isn't it? It also leads to the weird thing where you technically win as both sides. And that I know that's a slight spoiler, but it isn't really, because it's not particularly interesting. That just kills you dead when you do get to the end of the story, that it was just a massive waste of time, essentially. And by playing as the Empire, you'll have to do things like destroy passenger ships full of civilians trying to escape the fleet you've destroyed, and you're told to blow them up for bonus points, which is a very dodgy message to be sending to begin with. And if you go, I don't know, I don't want to just murder a bunch of civilians, you get a bad medal at the end of it. And I'm like, oh, that's not very fair, is it? I'm sorry that I didn't want to kill civilians, EA. I know that you'd happily pull the trigger. You wouldn't think twice, but maybe I want to. And you don't get that choice. You either do it or you don't. And if you don't, you get a crap medal at the end of it. And you think, well, okay, that seems strange. When they've spent the past 3 missions telling me to be good, now I'm meant to kill all the civilians. It's just tonally all over the place.
Yeah.
And it just makes for a very strange experience where you can't even just delve into the story because it's so tedious. I mean, the dogfighting's tedious, and then the mission design is the same. And by the time it's over, and it's only 6 hours long, it felt like I'd been playing this game for weeks. I only played it for 2 nights, and I felt like I'd grown old with Star Wars Squadrons by the time I finished it.
No, I get that completely, and I totally agree with you about the the effect on the story that it has, and the fact that you win every mission, because you spend the whole story just erasing the successes you've just done. That's the whole hook of this story is you'll win a couple of missions with the good guys, and then win a couple of missions with the bad guys, which just defeat the thing you just succeeded in. It just completely circles around on itself until it's completely pointless. But I mean, I kind of, it's a tricky one, this game, because I do think it does do some stuff well. If you like these authentic cockpit view flying games, this does, it handles well. It feels right. It feels authentic in that context. As is tradition with loads of Star Wars properties at this point, the sound design is fantastic. Of course it is. The sounds of TIE fighters going past over your head, or X-Wings flying around the lasers, they all sound fantastic. Especially if you've got a surround headset. I mean, ideal situation is that, because it's really knocks that out of the park. Visually, it all looks really authentic. It runs really well, I think, as well. The Series X can play this at 120 frames, or it can do 4K 60, which both are good options. I ended up playing 120 FPS because it just makes it look really smooth. So I don't know, they've kind of put together a decent package here if you just want to pick it up and play the online multiplayer, I would say. I played a couple of matches of it, and I'm not going to stick with it because, again, I'm more of an arcadey space flying kind of guy. But if that's the kind of gameplay you like, it seems well put together. It seems like, there's some good battles to be had. Like, I was worried about it just being too frustrating. I thought I would just suck at it and lose because all the people online are going to be like really good. But it seems quite well balanced. You get thrown in rooms with a lot of people who probably have similar levels of experience. There's a whole new audience now, of course. It's an EA player, so that'll definitely help. So I don't know. I mean, I'd almost say don't even bother playing the story, but you probably do need it as an opportunity to learn about how to fly the different ships is the only problem. Like, yeah, it's a really tricky one. I don't know. I think if you fancy the multiplayer, maybe just grind out the story for a bit to get used to it, and then just put it aside. You're not missing anything by skipping the story.
Yeah, this is a multiplayer-focused game. I don't think they're making any bones to hide it. All the upgrades and the cosmetics you can do is all earned in multiplayer. You get nothing for doing the main story, apart from a consolation skin, which they almost resented giving you, and I had to dig into the menus to find it. It was that hard to find. If you want to play some multiplayer dogfighting, this is a pretty good game. It's well put together. It's not a bad title. It plays fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I suck at flying sims, but I have a sneaking suspicion most people suck at flying games. So this is probably the time to play it while there's enough losers like me out there who will be trying to give it a go before the expert X-Wing folk come back to take over their territory. So if you want to give it a go, I'd say play it bloody now while it's actually going to be a fun community, because in a few months' time, when everybody's left and only the hardcore space freaks remain, this is going to be a miserable multiplayer experience and a miserable single-player experience. So if you want to play this game, play it now. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you do. I'd say it's a 6 out of 10. I think it's perfectly adequate. If you like your Star Wars, you might get something out of it. But yeah, it wasn't really for me. I found it a bit dull.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I gave this a 6. In many ways, I got more enjoyment out of Empire of Sin, but that's largely a broken game. Whereas, again, this is everything about this game is at least competent. Again, it's well put together, visually, audio, all great. It's just dull. So, maybe that's just us not being a fan of the genre. I don't know, but yeah, I think it's worth a look, particularly if you're a Star Wars fan. But I do completely agree with you. I think if you want to play the multiplayer, get in now while it's full of idiots like us, because I think good players in this game are just going to be insufferable to try and play against.
Okay, let's move on to our next game, which is Undertale. Now, as Andy rightly mentioned at the top of the show, I did grade this as my game of the generation all the way back in Beat the Sheet episode 22. So do check that out if you want to hear all of our games of the generation and my thoughts at that time about what made Undertale that damn good. But I'm not going to jump straight into my diatribe of praise because Andy hasn't played it before, so his thoughts are much fresher, much more relevant than mine are. So why don't you tell me what you made of Undertale?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, Undertale is one of those games I always wanted to get around to because, the amount of praise it's been getting online since it came out, it's just, off the charts. And it's one of those games where if you see anything from it, if you see like a brief clip of it or a few screenshots, it's almost impossible to understand how it's so revered. It doesn't give off an immediate impression of this must be one of the best games ever made. So, it's always been of interest to me. I've always really wanted to put some time into it. And yeah, finally got the chance this week. And, the funny thing is, this isn't a particularly long game, right? I think it takes about maybe 7 hours if you do like one of the runs that gets you to like a true ending, maybe 6 even, it's not massively long. And yeah, I played the first about 2 hours of it, 2.5 hours of it earlier in the week. And I was thinking, we're in for some fireworks on this week's Beat the Sheet because I think this is just completely adequate. Like I was just indifferent to the game. I was like, it's all right. It's a retro styled RPG. There's some kind of generic like ice puzzles and, simple RPG puzzle mechanics. And, the dialogue's pretty funny, but I wanted something more from it. And so I thought I was going to be coming today and being like, you just praising this game to no end, me trying to somehow justify why I don't think it's that good. And then I played about 4 hours of Undertale, and Undertale is one of the best games ever made, simply enough. So yeah, I kind of just completely went back on that. Yeah, look, I mean, this game is it crept up on me, man. I don't know. I just kind of, like I said, the first couple of hours I thought a little bit funny. Gameplay is not up to much, whatever. I'll stick with it. And then you go forward a couple more hours, and by this point, I'm thinking, all right, actually, this game is hilariously funny. It's like easily probably the funniest game I've played. And also, I'm now starting to care about everything that's happening in the world and the characters. I mean, the gameplay, frankly, never really does go anywhere. There's a pretty interesting combat system in this game. Combat basically takes place in effectively a little square where you kind of play a mini bullet hell shooting game and dodge bullets and stuff. And I guess that's pretty unique. But from a strictly mechanical point of view, the game doesn't do anything crazy. It's all fairly by the books for a retro RPG, except for that bit. But as the game goes on, you just don't care. That's the thing. Like, I cared at first. I was like, why am I doing ice puzzles and like sliding block puzzles? And then 2 hours later, I could not care less about the actual gameplay side of what I was doing, because I just wanted to keep going. I wanted to see more dialogue with these characters. I wanted to, bump into the crazy robot again, which is just a fantastic character. I just wanted to experience all that stuff. And then, so at this point, I'm probably talking about the middle point of the game. Then I do the last couple of hours of the game, and it's probably one of my favorite like segments of games I've ever played. Like the final kind of 90 minutes to 2 hours I spent with this game is genuinely up there with my favorite times playing a game. Frankly, I absolutely adore it. I just think the game just absolutely perfectly manages to blend humor with just an absolute gut punch of a story. Like I don't know, we've spoke a lot on whenever like smaller indie titles have came up in Game Pass, there's a lot of them that try too hard to be emotional. They force a story in front of your face about some, I don't know, some family that split up, or maybe someone died, or like a stupid old man abandoned his family and went out to sea in that one game. I forget what that one was even called. Old Man's Journey. That's the one. Like just largely garbage. And they just try and force an emotional scene on you. Undertale doesn't do that at all. Undertale, it doesn't even try and force the issue. You just play the game, and because it's so well written, you naturally start to give a shit about all of these characters. And then when that all culminates, it's absolutely breathtaking. Yeah, I mean it's a crazy one, because as I said, this is a 6-hour game, and if I'm saying that the first 2 hours I was indifferent to it, that's a third of my time playing it. And yeah, I'm completely in love with it overall. Like if I played that 2 hours again now, I would love that as well, because I know what the game is now. It's crazy. I just think, the one thing I would get from my thoughts on this is if you have tried this game and you fell off it early on, like that's fine. Like that probably doesn't mean that it's not for you. It probably just means it hasn't quite kicked in for you yet. I don't know. I think I could see a lot of people doing that. I could see a lot of people starting this game out and just being like, I don't get what the fuss is. Like, why do people care about this game so much? And I'd implore those people to just put a bit more time into it. Just go a bit further, because yeah, I mean, it completely changed my outlook on it. Like it was, yeah, I've never had such a drastic change in opinion on a game.
Yeah, I did some. I mean, we obviously spoke about this during the week, and I was hearing your indifferent thoughts, and I was just getting ready to absolutely slay you, even daring to talk bad of my precious baby boy. But obviously, eventually, the thing about Undertale is, and the reason why it's so wonderful is, Undertale will win you over by being thoroughly decent. And I don't mean decent in the terms of enjoyable to play. I mean decent as in it's a decent person of a video game. It's just thoroughly good. And you don't get many bits of entertainment which are just good. And not good in a preachy way or good in a, emotionally heartstringy, tuggy kind of way. It's just thoroughly itself. Undertale is completely and utterly of itself. And you'll never play anything else like it, because there isn't anything else like it. Undertale, people say it's a bit like Earthbound. It's got a similar art style and a similar almost setup, but it plays nothing like Earthbound. Not really. No. It's nothing like it on the whole. It has RPG elements, sure, but most of the time the game is actively encouraging you to not use them. The game wants you to play into its own wonderfully crafted combat system where you don't swing a sword or cast a spell. You just talk to the monsters and you get to know them and you win them over by doing ridiculous things. Like if there's a dog, you'll try and pet it, because if you pet the dog will fall asleep and love you because it's a dog. That's what they do. Or you'll flirt with a bit of amorphous jelly and they'll wobble and they'll like that for some unbeknownst reason. Yeah. And it's very clever and it's very weird. And I can't think of a combat system like it. I don't think there's anything like it. It's utterly unique. And it may be that at first feels a bit obnoxious, but it's not trying to be. Undertale is never obnoxious. Undertale is actually just wholeheartedly sweet in its nature. And it's such a wonderful way to interact with the video game world, I thought.
I think that's the thing, with Undertale. Like, one of the main hooks of this game, I think it's in like, on more storefronts, it'll be in the blurb of the first thing it says about the game, is that it's an RPG where you don't have to kill anyone. And that's, it's more unique than it should be, frankly. I wish we kind of had more games where, it'd be nice if we had more games that all weren't about murder, but, here we are. That's just the origin of games at this point. But Undertale just manages to nail that without even really doing anything. I don't want to say it doesn't do anything special, because it is a special game, but it almost makes it look simple, right? Like, it's, as you said, you get into a monster encounter and, sure, there is a fight button and you can hit it in the face, but you don't need to, and you shouldn't, like you totally can if you want. But Undertale's a game where the whole point of this game is that, you go through and you talk to everyone and you figure out how to get out of that battle without needing to fight. And you can do that with everything in this game, because that was the whole point. You never need to actually like kill anyone. And it's impressive the way they manage that. And I kind of think that, early on I was a bit frustrated by it as well, because, you're talking to these monsters, you're picking the conversation choices or the actions to do. And at first it can be a bit like, you might pick an action and it doesn't do anything useful. So you're like, oh, that's annoying. But then as you get more through the game, you almost fall into an understanding with Undertale. You start to figure out what it's going to want you to do, right? Like, you'll run into a new monster you haven't seen before. And just from reading the dialogue and seeing the way that monster's kind of acting, you'll start to become much sharper at knowing what the right options are to pick and what the right attitude is to go for to get out of that battle. And what's more as well, there's absolutely no real negative connotation to picking the wrong one. You'll just have to defend against an extra wave of attacks. So, there's no frustration there either if you don't talk someone down the right way. You always get another go at it. And as you kind of spend more time doing that, I in my head, it went from being frustrating to just being an absolute joy. Like, some of the ways that you get out of these battles are just so endearing and charming. And they manage to do that without it feeling forced. It never feels forced in this game, and that's really, really difficult to do. I very rarely see a game that manages to achieve that.
And of course, you mentioned that the way you do deal with enemy attacks in this game is via these mini little. The whole game almost looks like an MS-DOS game. It's like it's really simple. It's very basic. There's nothing special about it in that sort of sense. But you have these tiny little bullet hell mini stages which you have to navigate through, and they're just full of good ideas, just full to the brim of it. If you fight a dog, it'll lob bones at you. If you fight a skeleton, it will also lob bones at you. That's a simple joke, but it's kind of funny. If you fight a sexy robot with great legs, you'll have to avoid its legs. Its legs will come and attack you. There's all sorts of things. You'll fight a frog who's very sad and you have to avoid its tears. These are the kind of things you have to do all the way through, and you have to weave in and out with your tiny little heart. And it's always engaging. And to learn the patterns is actually quite difficult. You'll die a lot in Undertale. Undertale is actually, particularly if you're trying for a pacifist run, quite a tricky game. A lot of these things, you have to start to learn the patterns and how to move around them. And at times it feels like you can't, that it's not possible to. Yeah. But there's always a way. There's always a way to figure it out. And learning the patterns of not just the dialogue, but the actual attacks themselves is a real wonderful marriage. You're having to learn so much about each character you're attacking, or, just try to not attack, essentially. And that's kind of a fun way to engage with the game as well. It's really something quite clever.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. They have a great habit of just subverting expectations in Undertale as well. There's, frankly, you won't hear the best part of Undertale from us talking about it here, because it would be doing the game a massive disservice to give away the best parts of Undertale in a conversation. But, you know, like we said, most of the combat is yeah, kind of bullet hell. You're a little heart in a box and you have to avoid all these attacks. But the game will just think of ingenious different things to do with that context. It won't always just be I need to dodge some stuff. There'll be all kinds of crazy other things that can happen. And as you go through more of the game and they reveal more of that to you, it's just, I don't know, it just constantly raises a smile every time. I just think, you know, you can't help but play this game and not feel happy about it by you know, after you've maybe got through a slightly rocky start in my case. I just, yeah, it just constantly just gives off happiness at every turn. And I mean, again, obviously, like I just said, we aren't going to be going into the best parts of this game here because it'd be a shame to give them away. But I would say that doing that, you know, again, they frame this as a game where you don't have to kill someone. I would strongly suggest that aiming to not kill anyone is the best way to get the best out of Undertale. I think, you know, you can play it in whatever way you want. You can kill everyone, or you can just even do a neutral one where, you know, maybe you kill the odd thing, but you spare other things. And that's all fine. You know, they all lead to different endings. But for me, the ending this game builds up to, if you don't kill anyone, I'm not going to say any more than to say that led me to that, what I said earlier, which is that the last couple of hours I spent in this game are one of my favorite blocks of time I've spent playing games. So yeah, I would strongly suggest try and do that.
Yeah, I would agree that the pacifist route for the game is probably the best route to take. I will say to play the game as it feels right to you in the moment. I've played through Undertale 3 times now. I've got 3 of the 4 different endings. And my first one was a neutral ending where there was an early boss character who, to defeat, you have to spare and endlessly spare. And I remember at the time, I felt like it wasn't ending and my health was running down and I kept losing to this person. And I thought, well, maybe there isn't a way to do it. And so I killed them. And I had to live with that for the rest of the game. Yeah. And it really hurt me in the final moments of the game when I realized the significance of this person to everybody else in it as well. Knowing what I'd done, knowing that I didn't have enough patience, I didn't try hard enough, I gave in to what was easy because it wasn't coming quickly. And in many ways, that was the most emotionally affecting ending to Undertale I had, was that I was flawed at it. I didn't do it the correct way. I did it the way I did, but the game didn't judge me for it. The game didn't call me a monster. The game just acknowledged that you're flawed, that nobody is perfect. And it was deeply affecting. It really is. There's so many different ways to play Undertale, which will hit at you in ways that you perhaps don't expect to. And the emotional punch of this game does sneak up on you to an extent, because for the vast majority of its runtime, Undertale is very, very funny. I can't begin to tell you how funny this game is. The characters in it are wonderfully, wonderfully written with really endearing dialogue. I, in my own writing, love to add in like ers and likes and awkward little stutterances and utterances, which usually edit out of copy to make it seem, you know, more engaging. But Undertale doesn't do that. They feel like awkward characters interacting in an awkward way. And I love that. It makes you feel so much closer to them than you would do normally. And you'll meet so many different, you'll meet weird skeletons, you'll meet nasty bastard monsters who are covered in armor and throwing spears at you, and you'll try and win them over. You'll meet a killer robot out of absolutely nowhere, which wants to rule the airwaves and be the most entertaining thing in the world. You'll meet an anime nerd. There's so many different funny kind of little archetype characters, but they all feel so real and they're all so funny. And my girlfriend always can't believe how much I'm laughing at Undertale. I'll laugh at Undertale more than I will most comedies, because there's always something. And I will, and I don't want to go into spoilers in this game, but I would encourage people who do end up playing this, do everything. Click on everything. Click on every item. Click on every person. Go back into the game when you've done other things and talk to them again. There's always something there to relearn, and it's always worth doing, incredibly enough.
No, that's very true. And I would say as well, on the note of the kind of comedy and the humor in this game, like, I don't think you'll ever find a game that will commit so much to a bit as what Undertale will do. You know, like, this game doesn't care that, like, it's humor. Like, sometimes the stuff it's doing for a joke will be, it just completely take you out of the rhythm of what you were currently doing in the game at that time. And it's just fine. You know, like, they're not they just go head first into the comedy, and it totally works. Like I said, I had that initial bit where I wasn't quite feeling it, but once I got past that, I'm the same as you. I found myself laughing and smiling at this game just constantly.
It's just a beautiful little story. It's wonderfully inclusive, if that's the kind of thing that you look out for in your entertainment. This game is, and it does it so wonderfully and so simply. I love that about it. And as I was saying, this game is emotional as heck. When you get to those final few hours, I've cried more times than I care to admit at Undertale, because it really hits you square in the heart. And in a game like Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, which I just find cloying and annoying, Undertale never does that. It never cloys at you. It never, moralizes at you. It's just itself. And that probably comes from the fact that it is created by one person with a little bit of help from others, but mainly just one man, Toby Fox. Yeah. It's his vision. It's his world. It's his story. It's utterly personal in a way that indie games felt like they would be for a little while. Indie games felt like they were going to be that. And then they stopped doing that. They didn't want to do it anymore. They wanted to be endless roguelikes. They wanted to chase where the trends were and where the money was going to be. Undertale is itself. I said that at the top, and I'll say it again. It's completely itself. And it is a fine and shining example of why indie gaming can be the best gaming experiences you'll have. And I wish more games would rediscover it.
Yeah, no, that's entirely fair. I mean, I think another thing as well with Undertale is that, you said there that this is largely, made from, it's one man's game. It's all from Toby Fox. And as well as, all this comedy, all this emotional heft that comes into this game, all this kind of inspirational content, it's all kind of just accentuated so heavily by what might be one of the greatest video game soundtracks that has ever existed, which again is all somehow created by this one man, just to make the legend of Toby Fox even more confusing. Like, he not only puts together this game, but also that entire soundtrack, which it's unbelievable. It really is. I mean, it's even more so once you've played the game. Like, before I played Undertale, you hear a couple of the songs all the time, like Megalovania and Hopes and Dreams. They kind of pop up whenever good video game music is being discussed or mentioned. And I appreciated the songs anyway, but once you have them in the context of the game, it's just something else. I don't know. Like, there's so many scenes in this game that are just perfectly mapped to, because it's all from one creator. Like, he knows exactly what he wants to get across in that exact scene, and he makes the music himself to go with it. Like, you're not going to get that same level of kind of I don't know, to use a dodgy business word, like synergy from a big company doing a big game with an entirely separate music department. You're just not going to get that, and you get it here, and it's just stunning.
Yeah, it's a testament to Undertale that you can go this long without mentioning what is possibly the greatest gaming score of all time. But it really is. It's wonderful to listen to. And all the boss fights have fantastic bits of music which loop wonderfully. There's callbacks to earlier bits of music weaved in all the way through the game, just trotted in and out. It all ends in a culmination with a massive coda of everything you've faced up to this point mixed in together. And you will literally want to scream with joy. It's so fun and so exciting in that moment. But there's also softer, more gentler moments, or the general Undertale theme of the game itself is just a soft guitar line, essentially, just generally repeated over. And it's very effective, it's very touching. He always matches music to the scene wonderfully. He accentuates what's going on with his writing and with his characters, with his music, as all good entertainment of a visual audio nature should do, but many games do just completely forget to bother with. Undertale actually does it very, very well. It elevates everything. The music in this game elevates a core experience, which to me was already so unique, bold, and interesting that it was already a solid 10 before you even stick on a fantastic bit of music. You throw it on as well. It's just a fantastic title. Undertale, without even a doubt in my mind, is one of my favorite games I've ever played. It's instantly up there. If I had to name them, I raved about gosh darn Doom last week. This is every bit as good as Doom. It might be better. It probably is better in many ways. It's an incredible video game. It truly is.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, so I obviously, I've only just finished this a few days ago, and I mean, currently I spend most of my waking hours still thinking about Undertale or listening to the soundtrack. But, maybe there's some recency bias. We'll see how I feel in a few weeks. But right now, I'm at a point where, in the last let's say a decade, just to pick a number out of my head. In the last decade, there's two games that kind of just live rent free in my head at all times, and they are Zelda Breath of the Wild and Outer Wilds, which is on Game Pass. Please play Outer Wilds. I have a very strong feeling that Undertale is about to become the third game in that set of games that I just will constantly be thinking about at all times. I want to play it again already. I'm making myself not already play it again because we have to play other games. We're sat here, with the need to play things like Empire of Sin, which as a side point, as much as I enjoyed my time in that is a depressing game to try and get into after you've played something of the quality of Undertale. But yeah, I think Undertale is just an absolute masterpiece. I easily gave this a 10 out of 10. I think it's absolutely stunning. Yeah, and as I said at the start, I'd implore people to really try and push on with this, even if you do find that you're struggling a bit in the early going, because I was honestly completely indifferent to this for a good couple of hours. I just thought, it's all right. And this is my opinion now. So yeah, even if just try your best to power through this one and keep at it until it grabs you, because I strongly feel like it will.
Yeah, I mean, Undertale, as you could predict, is a 10 out of 10 for me. It's a wonderful video game. If you're the kind of person who is bewilderingly and baffling listens to my opinion, in the past week you'll have played Doom 93 followed by Undertale, you might as well just give up on video games, because it's not going to get any better. This is about as good a 2 weeks you'll ever have in your life of games to play. You have to play Undertale. You may not like it. You can never promise somebody will like something, but you have to play it. You have to give it a go. I can't stress it high enough. And now that it's available on Game Pass, I'd have paid £100 to play this game again without even thinking. So to have it on Game Pass, ready to download as part of your subscription, it's an absolute must play. I can't stress it enough.
No, that's very fair. And I would say as well, just while we're on this one, it's only really just clicked in my head, but how much of a perfect 1-2 punch is Doom 93 into Undertale? Because like one is so singularly focused on constant death, and the other one is the exact opposite. It's relentlessly focused on like not hurting anyone, not harming anyone, talking your way out of situations. They're exact opposites. And I just love the idea of that being someone's weekend, like 5 hours of Doom 93, 5 or 6 hours of Undertale. Like that's a pretty perfect gaming combination for me.
I've got to boot up Doom 93 now and apologize to all those Kako demons. I didn't give them the opportunity. I should have brushed their hair or something. That's what Undertale would have told me to do.
I'm all for a game where you befriend Kako demons. Those are the absolute best demons. Like that sounds great.
Okay, let's move on to our leaving soon titles. Now, these next two are set to leave on the 31st of March, which is a Wednesday, which is a very rare occurrence for this past year. So you have plenty of time to get around to them, even more so because there's only 2 of them. And they are Hyperdot and Journey to the Savage Planet. Now, this couldn't be easier for us. We've played both of them. This was a gimme of a leaving soon week for us in particular. But do you have any overall thoughts on these two as a lineup?
I mean, yeah, it's a nice easy one for anyone, really. It's good for us because we've played them, but also, these games aren't that long, so I think good little combination. Anyone who has any interest in these should have plenty of time. There's like 9 days left from the day this episode goes out, so easily enough time to play them. And yeah, I think it's easy enough to get through them. I would say Hyperdot is a tricky one, because that's kind of a game where you're not going to want to just rush through it. It's the kind of game that's nice to be on Game Pass because you can just casually pick it up every now and then. But it's not a game where I'm going to recommend you try and complete Hyperdot. I just think that's a bit, but just it's not going to have a good time if you do that. But we'll get into it in more detail soon.
Yeah, let's go straight into Hyperdot. Hyperdot, a game which is essentially you control a dot and you try to avoid objects. Hyperdot is a mobile phone game which has somehow managed to con its way onto the Xbox Game Pass for console and PC service. So kudos to it on that front. Let's be honest here. I don't think this is exactly the definition of a must-play title, but it doesn't really do much wrong, I suppose. I guess it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, no, I think it is too. Hyperdot is it's very minimalist, simple game. Basically, there's in the main sort of story mode, if you're going to call it story mode, there's just 100 levels, and each level is you play as a circle. You're in a larger circle, and you just have to avoid stuff for a certain amount of time, and the levels start off pretty simple. There might just be a couple of lasers going past and you have to not hit them. And then by the end, they get absolutely ludicrous to the point where, it's almost impossible to even beat them. And, it's just a quick, simple kind of pick up and play game, which is, I mean, it's nice for that to be in Game Pass, I guess, because you can just load it up whenever without feeling like, you need to hammer through it because you just bought it. But also, as you kind of said, Josh, that's not the kind of gaming I'm often looking for from a home console. It's just not. It's not why I'm turning that machine on. It is something that would be more suited on a mobile phone. Now, I don't necessarily think the controls would work well on a mobile phone. I think touchscreen controls would be a bit of a mess in this one, but the actual just scope of the game kind of sits in that region. We actually did a feature a long time ago, which was about recommending games to play on the Xbox Cloud streaming service, on your mobile. And this game's a good fit for that, I think. Connect the controller to your phone, just play it casually on there. I think that's the better fit for it. But as something to play on a big TV, it just, it's so minimal. It just feels weird.
Yeah, it is very minimal. The art style's quite nice for what it is. It uses monochrome colors pretty well, almost entirely throughout. There's the odd bit of neon thrown in as well in certain levels where you have to, your own little dot lights up the stage and you have to avoid obstacles coming in from the darkness. You have to react immediately to the dot's light, essentially. That's kind of fun. That's kind of cool. It finds different ways to play on the formula. It has a super hot stage because everything needs to have a super hot stage nowadays where, the enemy projectiles will only move when you do. I think they call it super dot, which is, I suppose that's a pretty good pun. Yeah. Fair enough. There's fun enough little wrinkles on the formula here. It's a perfectly enjoyable arcade puzzle game. Twitch reflexes more than anything else. It's fine. It's kind of okay. It's a hard game to say a lot about. Like if you want to play Hyperdot, if you want a very basic arcade game where you just do some simple little challenges and you may try and get a high score, here's Hyperdot. You've got 10 days. Good luck. You'll play enough of it in 10 days to be done with it. No one's gonna go, Christ, I wish I had Hyperdot 6 months from now, unless they're ill. Most people are going to play this, have enough out of it, and then just move on.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I did when this came to the service. I hammered through it, played all the levels, beat the vast majority of them. I think there's like one level at the end, which is just a joke that I never managed to quite do. But played every level, gave it all a look. You can create your own levels if you want to as well, which fair enough. I never really was too interested in doing that in Hyperdot, but yeah, it's like you said. I mean, it's a super simple arcade game. There's really not a lot to say on it other than that it's fine for what it is. It's functional. It's all very smooth. It all works quite well. The only real negative I have is I think as the levels get insanely difficult by the end, the analog stick controls aren't precise enough to really succeed. Like the game is asking you to kind of inhabit spaces that are about the same size as the actual ball you're controlling, and a slight move of the analog stick to the side will make you kind of judder to the side quite a lot, and you'll just fail. So the game kind of starts to just crumble away in those later levels when it asks more of you than you can actually achieve, I would say. But other than that, it's fine. The only negative I have really as well is that now that it is leaving Game Pass, this becomes more of an issue. But this game came out overpriced by quite an extreme amount for me. Like the full price, the full price of this on the store is like £15 or $20, which is way beyond what Hyperdot should be up there for. I think if you chop those prices in half, like it's kind of fine then. I'd probably still wait for a little sale even at that price, to be honest. But I think, asking for like 15 or £20 or whatever for a very simple arcade game, I don't know, it just stings a bit for me. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that's way overpriced. I wouldn't recommend anybody picks it up for the very measly Game Pass discount which gets put out, where you have to pay full price somehow, despite most of the games which leave being 2 or 3 years old. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend you buy this title. And as you say, the difficulty does creep up towards the back end. Great for those who want, to extend the challenge a little bit and have to, really get into a zen kind of frame of mind to polish off the title. But as you mentioned, the analog stick isn't precise enough for this. You kind of need a mouse. For those final few levels, I think a mouse is almost essential to be able to actually complete the game easily. You could do it, but you'll die a lot. All the levels are pretty short. They're like 20 seconds each, which I like. Nothing really outstays its welcome. It's not a bad game. It's perfectly fine, but I don't think I could sit here with a straight face after talking about Undertale for 30 minutes and muster up any enthusiasm for Hyperdot, which is perfectly adequate, but is what it is.
No, I'm the same as you. I gave Hyperdot a 5 out of 10 on the sheet because it's just everything is completely fine. I don't know. It doesn't do anything else to really go anywhere. It's all like fair. It's fairly well put together, and it's a simple game that manages to play fine. That's all I've got for you.
Yeah, I'd give it a 5 as well. Maybe if I was able to talk to these dots, I'd give it a 10. But unfortunately, it's only Undertale where you get to talk to the dots. So let's just move swiftly on to our next title, which has a little bit more to say about it, and that's Journey to the Savage Planet. Now, this is a game by Typhoon Studios, who made the very smart decision to be exclusively signed to Google Stadia and are therefore now shut down. So This is pretty much going to be their only title. And that's kind of a shame, I'd say, actually, because I think this is a pretty good game. This is a 3D Metroidvania. It's very much in the Metroid Prime style, where you're scanning items and locations to find out more about the world, gaining power-ups to be able to traverse it. And when I think of what Game Pass is, and to me, Game Pass has always been a service to play those games I wouldn't pay money for, Journey to the Center of the Planet is actually pretty high up on the list of games I was interested in, but didn't want to pay actual money for. Yeah. So this is a very good Game Pass title, and I would, to kick us off here, say that you probably should try and pick this up before it leaves.
Yeah, no, I think so. I was completely the same as you. I remember when this got added in, it'd only been out a few months, I think. So I was really excited to see it. I'm a big fan of kind of Metroid Prime, and this certainly doesn't match the atmosphere. It's gone for a completely different angle, but the core gameplay hook is there. You explore these 3 different areas of this planet that's inhabited by all kinds of like wacky, crazy monsters, and the main part of the game really is just to go around it and get more power-ups that help you get through to the other areas. Classic Metroidvania kind of stuff. You'll get a grappling hook, you'll get an ability to like ground pound through some areas of the floor, double jumps, triple jumps, all the usual stuff. And when the game is focused on that, it's actually, I think it's really good stuff. The planet itself is intensely colorful. There's a lot of personality to the planet. It looks, it's always visually appealing to look at. The monsters are all like just weird, cutesy monsters, and they're kind of, I don't know, they're intentionally cute to a fault for the most part, and then every now and then you'll get some grotesque monster. And they're all fun to look at and see what's going on with them. The game is insistent that you should murder them all. The game has a real kind of desire for you to just shoot all of the cute things, which sure, why not? But there's good stuff here. There is. I think again, it's at its best when it's an exploration game and you're exploring all these areas, finding secrets. That's really fun. I think it does fall down quite a lot when it starts to focus too much on its combat, because the combat in this game isn't great. It's pretty bare bones first person shooter kind of handling, but then all the enemies basically just have lit up weak points, which, is a trope that died long ago and is now apparently back. Like almost every enemy will just have a big shining like yellow globe on it that you have to shoot to kill it. And most of the combat is just dodging the enemy until it shows the yellow globe and then you shoot it, which, that's never going to be that much fun. It's kind of a game of two halves really in that way.
Yeah, the combat isn't exactly thrilling. I agree with you that the creature design is very good. Everything is ridiculously cute. Like the first enemy you'll see is like a little Tweety bird, just really plump and oversized, and it looks really sweet, and it doesn't look like it wants to hurt you. And the game instantly says you need to kill it, and it blows up in the most satisfyingly over the top way possible. So the game has a very good sense of humor about its murder. It knows that it's asking you to kill these deliciously cute monsters, and you're going to have to take like a weird thrill in seeing them pop almost out of nowhere. It's quite fun for that. It's kind of funny. The game gets a lot of its best humor because the game is very much trying to be funny out of when you are being just a bit of a jerk to this perfectly lovely, gorgeous, beautiful planet you've landed on. You're just going to just destroy it because you're human, and that's what you do. The game plays and leans into that quite a lot. And at those moments, it's quite funny. It also has a lot of my most hated recent trope of evil corporation is sending you to do this. Let's watch a bunch of fake adverts, which seems to have infiltrated all games at the moment because at some points, apparently in the past 3 or 4 years, people realized that corporations were bad. And everybody suddenly wants to tell me that, like I somehow didn't notice and think they're still like the greatest joke ever made. It's a strange thing, but it is very much front and center of this title.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, the kind of corporations gone mad thing in this game it falls pretty flat. It's a bit annoying and grating. I also find as well that you spend a lot of this game with a kind of robot companion voice in your head that talks to you a lot, and that gets real irritating in this game. There's even an option in the options menu to just turn it off, but like you shouldn't turn it off because it actually has a lot of like narrative parts of the game. Actually, it's your main dialogue thing, so it's telling you what you're going to do next, talking about the next area you're going to go to, stuff like that. But they still have an option to turn it off, which I think is quite telling because it's it definitely annoyed me to no end. But yeah, it's again, the game is, the look of it really, I think, sells it more than anything. It's a very unique looking game, and a lot of the humor that works does just come from that. It comes from the fact that the monster designs are so unique, or the fact that the world is so lovely and beautiful. Because, yeah, as you said, the main kind of goal of you being there is basically just to destroy the place and take it over because we're horrible humans. So, that's all fine. It works fairly well when you're not watching crap adverts and cringy FMV videos with some CEO of the company man, which I think that all kind of sucks. But yeah, look, I think the game is worth trying while it's in Game Pass. I think definitely that's worth a go. It's particularly short for just a basic run through as well. I think if you just want to do the story in this game and explore off the odd beaten path as you go through it, then you'll probably be done in 6 to 7 hours. And I think you'll enjoy those 6 or 7 hours. You'll be leaving a lot of kind of secrets on the table that you could find later on. And in my experience, you kind of run out of steam for that stuff anyway. Like, there's not really that much interesting stuff to collect in Journey to the Savage Planet. When you actually look in your menus of the collectibles, it's all very, it's just numbers, right? It's like, oh, you've collected 1 out of 100 of these globes, or like 3 out of 42 of this particular collectible. Like, there's nothing really driving you to proceed on that path. When you do explore, it's more because the world is interesting, and the secret at the end is just something to say you went there. But I don't think the secrets, like, once I rolled credits on this game, no part of me thought I'm going to go back in and get more secrets. It's just, they're just not quite interesting enough for that. But yeah, for a basic run through the story, I think 6 or 7 hours, if you can find the time in the next sort of nine or so days, then by all means, give it a go.
Yeah, this is a very playable video game. It's a shame that the studio disappears, because I think this is a very good groundwork for them to do more and to do better things off the back of it. It's a real shame they decided to tie their flag to the Stadia mast, which that was a pretty dodgy mast to begin with. So, that wasn't the best decision. But as you say, exploring the world is pretty fun. It's very colorful. It's the actual platform in itself, considering it's first person, isn't too frustrating. Has a nice momentum to it when you are swinging between different objects and, climbing up things, which I like. Hits that pretty well. Combat's a bit flat, but the exploration and the navigation of the traversal is fun enough to make up for it. So there's definite plus points here. There's a lot of good stuff here. It's a very colorful world. The Xbox as a console isn't famed for its color outside of like Viva Pinata. So it's a bit of a throwback, if nothing else. You don't get much like it visually on the surface. So there's plenty to enjoy about this title. I had an awful save glitch right at the end of the game, which wiped all my progress down to practically zero. So I missed out on the final boss by about 30 minutes. So thank you for that Journey to the Savage Planet. I hold you entirely responsible for that. And that's reflected in my score. Any game that glitches out and deletes vast swathes of progress instantly gets a bad score from me. But this isn't a widespread issue. I think a couple of people had it, and I think it's probably been patched out since then. So yeah, I'd say give this a go. It's only a short little title. You've got plenty of time to play it. I'd certainly play this over gosh darn Hyperdot. I mean, Christ, if you could only got time for one, I'd pick this one way ahead of that.
Yeah, no, that's that. I agree completely with that. I mean, I came out of this one giving it a 7 out of 10. I think it's a really good effort. Hopefully the entire studio can, maybe even just reform somewhere else, frankly, because yeah, they were dealt a bad hand, really. Bought by Stadia only to then just be shut without doing anything, really. So hopefully they can get back together because there's clearly a lot of talent there. I think they've got a good mind, especially for visual direction. I think is on point in this game. So I'd like to see them do more stuff. And this is definitely the pick of the Leaving Soon titles. If this week didn't have Undertale in it, it would be the best game of the week. But it's very much not since Undertale is here.
Yes, it's no Undertale. I'd say it's a 5 out of 10 due to my save glitch. If I was being a bit more fair, I'd say it's a 7 as well. I like this game. I think it's pretty fun, but it's hardly anything to write home about. If you don't have the time to play it because you're too busy crying because Undertale broke you emotionally, then I understand. I think you can park it for until a radical sale comes on it, maybe in the near future.
Yeah, because I mean, again, we talked earlier about the combination of Doom and Undertale, and yeah, I don't see me finishing Undertale and thinking I want to go to this planet full of cute monsters and shoot them in the face. So maybe Journey to the Savage Planet doesn't quite work at that time either. But yeah, nonetheless, decent game. All right then, so let's close out the show this week with a bit of news, and we've got a few stories this week. It's been a fairly busy week. To open that up, we have had EA Play has finally come to Game Pass for PC this week, which was, it was initially meant to be, I believe, December last year or maybe even January. And then they had some kind of issue. It wasn't going to work. So they had to, apologize. They apologized the day before it came out, which wasn't a great look, and said it's not going to happen. And yeah, here we are. It's here now. And that's great. It's good for people who are using the PCs more than the home consoles. The EA Play library actually has quite a few games in it on PC that are only on PC. So you get like a big pack of the old Command and Conquer games was one I noticed, which is, it's a nice thing to get for free. You can play The Sims on there and actually play it with competent controls, so that's another one that's a win. But yeah, this is a good thing. I actually tweeted about this when I saw it because I saw like a step-by-step instructions list for this, and it kind of said you had to get this EA desktop app, and then you had to go in that app and link it to your Xbox account. And I was thinking like, oh no, like this is going to be just needlessly annoying. And if there's one thing that PC gamers don't like, it's having like a million storefronts on their PC. Like the Epic Game Stores had so much resistance against it just because it's not Steam, just because they have to, people don't like having to open a second storefront for different games, and then there's like now to kind of bring EA in as well. It's obviously some people aren't best pleased with that, but from my experience, I checked this out. For some reason, I made myself play some Battlefield 4 on it. I don't know why. That wasn't a particularly enjoyable experience, but I downloaded and played that to see how it'd work, and it's actually quite seamless. You do have to get the EA desktop app. You have to go in there one time and link it to your Xbox account. But then once that's done, you can actually just use the Xbox app as the hub. So the Xbox app can see all of the EA games, it can install them all, and it can play them all. It's just you have to have the EA app on your PC also. So I quite like that, actually. It's not as intrusive as I expected it to be, and I like that you still have all of the Game Pass games coming from the same place on the Xbox app. So yeah, it's quite well put together, and just good to see it's out now.
Yeah, it's about time. I mean, let's be honest, it's been quite a few months for this to actually turn up, but it's good that it's launching with those Command and Conquer games. I think that's good, because EA could have just fobbed them off and just given the console lineup. So It's nice that they've actually thought about adding some more PC-focused EA titles in as well. It's good news for Game Pass for PC players. It's about time it was added in. It's good that it's here. Glad that it's not too much of a cumbersome faff to actually get into. You've still got EA Play, which is chock full of games which aren't that good. But, I mean, what can you do? That's EA for you. There's not much. I mean, you went through the list. You picked up Battlefield 4, for Christ's sake. And that game's sodded awful.
Yeah, but we famously hate ourselves. This is what we do. You know how this show works. You look down a list of decent games, and then you just 20 minutes later, without even knowing what happened, you're just playing Unravel for some reason. It's how we function.
I mean, yeah, I can't talk. I did literally follow up Undertale this week by playing Unravel and nearly put myself off the entire medium of video games. such was the anger I had towards that game for its soppy, meaningless crap story. actually play. Oh God, don't play Unravel. That's the lesson from this week. EA Play new subscribers. Fob off Unravel. It sucks.
Look forward to a double feature at some point on this show where we play Unravel 1 and 2 and lose the will to live. It's gonna be a good week. But anyway, yeah. So let's move on then. Next news item really is more of a PSA, but it's hopefully a good sign for things to come. It seems like the Xbox Series S is finally actually staying in stock, at least over here in the UK. I don't know quite how it's doing in the rest of the world right now, but that's a good sign. It's finally, we're at a point, like 5 months on, 5.5 months on, where at least one of the next gen consoles can now be picked up and purchased without having to, go through some kind of hell. So yeah, hopefully the X and the PS5 will just be a couple of months or maybe hopefully even less away from being in the same situation. But if not, the Series S is a good little pickup. It's a cheap console. It seems to be performing well from all the impressions I've seen about it. You seem to be quite enjoying yours as well, Josh. So yeah, good to see this.
Yeah, Series S is a decent little console. Don't get me wrong. I've already decided I'm going to sell it and buy a Series X in like a year's time when they're more readily available, just because I can already see the writing on the wall for developers just moaning incessantly about the Series S. So I get the feeling it might be cut adrift somewhat. But, for now, at the very least, it's a budget option and it works very well, plays very well. So by all means, if you see one in stock, pick one up.
Yeah, and I mean, the good news is as well, as we said, obviously, it's been about 5.5 months, but the good news is you've missed literally nothing. If you haven't managed to get one until now, you've only missed the medium so far. So, you're coming in as just right at the start, just like we are, except for we've had them for half a year. That's just next gen, apparently. Oh, right then. So next news story. We said last week that we'd be covering this week's Square Enix event, which was on. They were showing some new titles from their lineup, and we will cover it because we definitely said we would. But gotta say, there wasn't a ton of exciting news from this one, Josh. I don't know if there was anything that stood out to you really from this.
Oh God, no! There's nothing to talk about. It was miserably boring. I regretted watching any of it. There's literally, just Cause Mobile. What the heck? Who cares? There's not a lot here. I mean, basically, the only thing you can talk about is the trailer for the new Life is Strange game, which looks like a Life is Strange game. Somebody's died, because that is the hook of every single story they do, and the superpower this time is empathy. Which, if that doesn't make you want to hurl into a bucket, then I don't know what will, because that's going to be saccharine as heck. I could guarantee you that much. 5 guesses what the moral of that story is going to be. But,
Yeah. No, that's fair.
I feel like the formula's running a little stale here for Life is Strange. I'm not going to lie. I don't have a lot of hype for this.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I feel like it'll be, like, at its worst, I think it'll be a completely reasonable, acceptable level of game, right? You're not going to hate your time with a Life is Strange game, but nothing from the trailer particularly excited me. And also as well, this game's actually made by Deck 9, they're the team who did the Before the Storm spin-off game for Life is Strange. So they did not make Life is Strange 1 and 2. And I felt like Life is Strange 2 was a good game. It's a more confident game than the original. It had its issues, mainly from it being an episodic game, but I enjoyed the direction it was going in. So I'm maybe a little disappointed to see this is kind of the backup team really making this new one. But we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it'll be good. One thing to note is that this game is releasing in its entirety in one go. So apparently it will be structured to have episodes, but it's not actually an episodic game, which might actually help it in the long run. One of our main criticisms when we spoke about Life is Strange 2 a long time ago was that because it was episodic, they kind of insisted on having every single episode basically stay in one area and then build up to some sort of climactic event so that the next episode could start fresh somewhere different or in a slightly different situation. And, maybe this game won't need to stick to that quite as much now, because it is just one collective package that you have to buy whole. So that's a good sign. I think that will hopefully lead to a better package here.
It should help with the storytelling, not having to have defined ends and finishes to each little section of the game you're trying to flog to somebody. That will definitely help. But yeah, as I say, the hook of the story and the overall arch of the story just feels a little bit okay, we're kind of running on empty now. I don't know how many more lead protagonists need to be about 15 years old and have a dead parent in Life is Strange games. Like, is there nothing else bad that happens in the world these people can focus on? It's just really strange. They've got like a dead parent fetish. The team don't know. It's very odd.
No, that's fair enough. We'll see. Maybe this will be the last one in the series, unless they can think of something that doesn't involve dead parents. But that remains to be seen at the moment. Yeah, the only other thing I noticed from the Square Enix event really was they announced a name for. There's a game that they were calling Project Afia that they've now gave a name, which is Forspoken, apparently. And the main reason I note this one is because I'll be honest, I watched, this was about a 2 minutes 20, 2 minutes 20 seconds trailer. And most of it was just the actor playing the lead character. She was talking about just how much she liked doing the role, typical PR stuff. They showed a couple of like cinematic shots that looked nice enough. It was the lead character, big, massive dinosaur dragon monster, all looked fine. And I completely didn't care. And then this game got to about the final 7 seconds of its trailer and just suddenly showed this like really fast-paced movement and combat across about like 5 or 6 quite distinct looking areas that just looked stunning. It looked really, really good. And now they only showed about 7 seconds of it. So it might be that, they're using a bit of smoke and mirrors to try and get some hype without actually having anything working yet that looks that good. But that 7 seconds did look real good. It really did. Apparently this has been made by the Final Fantasy 15 team as well. And it's using the same engine. So, it very much might end up just being a game that plays like FF15 or FF7 Remake, I guess, which kind of took the mantle of that game and expanded on it a bit. So I think there's something here to be excited about, but we're still way too early to really know anything about it.
Yeah, it's a long way off. It all looks very Square Enix, very what you'd expect it to be. These guys seem to have got the knack of a good action RPG combat system. So that always gives me more hope for these titles than I probably ever had before. I'm looking forward to this one, even if its title's a little bit naff. Forspoken doesn't exactly inspire awe and reverence, does it? But it seems okay. And with it being the Final Fantasy 15 team, I loved Final Fantasy 15. So yeah, let's give it a go. It's PS5 exclusive, right? This game, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how long it stays it. But nonetheless, yeah, something to pick up perhaps. I think in 2022 or more likely 2027 when it finally launches.
That's fair. There's actually I noticed a couple of rumors online suggesting that this might, like, even this Forspoken name might not be the actual name of the game because people think it might actually be a game set in the Final Fantasy 15 world. And basically all they're going off for that is that some of the world looks the same in the trailer. Now, realistically, this is the same team of people making another game in the same engine. So that's probably why it looks the same. But, I'd be on board for that. You want to give me a game in the Final Fantasy 15 world, but like set in a different time, then by all means do it. But I don't think that's quite what's happening here.
We haven't had a good Final Fantasy 15-2 for a few years now. Do you remember when they all used to have like a Final Fantasy 10-2?
Yeah,
and you get all the weird sort of stuff. We haven't had one of them for a while. So, yeah, maybe we can get a good hyphen back in the game.
Yeah, we are overdue, actually, because 13 had 13-2 and then 13 Lightning Returns. I said 10 had 10-2. I mean, even Final Fantasy 7 Remake, right? It's technically getting 7 Remake Intergrade on the PS5. So you gotta do some kind of wacky re-release of a Final Fantasy thing. It's just the way it goes. But we'll see how it goes anyway. But yeah, honestly, that's really all there was from the Square Enix event. I mean, if you want to laugh at some more Balan Wonderworld footage, you can maybe catch the bit that showed off co-op in Balan Wonderworld, because that game continues to look absolutely abysmal, and yeah, I definitely want it. but other than that, yeah, there's not really too much else to report on from the Square event. Right then, so yeah, one final thing, which is more of an announcement ahead of next week's show, really. Microsoft are doing some kind of event this week. So March 26th at 4 p.m. over here in the UK, and that's 9 a.m. Pacific time over in the US. They're doing a Xbox kind of Twitch collaboration event, which is a bit weird. It's not the usual way they do these things, but yeah, they're going to be apparently showing... Well, the messaging on this is really weird. I still haven't managed to make sense of this, Josh, and I've been trying. But all of the announcements suggest that they're going to show trailers and gameplay for more than 25 games, they keep saying. They always say more than 25 or like over 25, so you're thinking in that range. They've said this is going to include Stalker 2 and then some indie games that are coming to Game Pass. So that's all great. But then also, they also keep saying that the event is going to have over 100 games. So I don't know why they keep saying over 100. And then one sentence later, they go, we're showing stuff for more than 25 games. It's like, well, yeah, you are, because you just said 100. Like, I don't quite know what the format of this is going to be. But, we'll certainly be tuning in. So we'll be checking it out on March 26th, 4 p.m. GMT. And we'll just find out then, I guess. We'll see what this is, and we will cover. Maybe we'll cover 25 games next week. Maybe we'll cover 100. Who knows? But we'll cover it anyway.
It's definitely a pretty weird one, isn't it, at this point? God knows what they're actually going to give us. I mean, yeah. I'm looking forward to the potentially largest ever lightning round ever of over 100 games to rattle through in 60 seconds, but I'm pretty certain that won't happen. Am I somewhat unsurprised that a company which shut down its own streaming service Mixer to join in with Facebook Gaming and is now doing a collaboration event with Twitch doesn't have the greatest messaging in the world? No, not particularly. That's a clusterfuck of stupidity right there, isn't it? But nonetheless.
I mean, yeah, as we said, we'll tune in, we'll see what the hell it is, but I certainly can't tell you right now. I can tell you if it's 100 games, we will not be doing a 100-game lightning round. I mean, we put out an episode last week that was debatably longer than the Snyder Cut, so I can't do another episode of that length. It's just not going to work.
Nothing's longer than the goddamn Snyder Cut. What sick freak wanted a 4.5-hour version of the Justice League?
I love the idea that
cut would be like an hour. Like,
well,
you
that's
want
it,
to take
right?
it
like,
away.
Why are you even calling it a cut at this point? Clearly, nothing has been cut. Like, if you end up with 4.5 hours, you've not cut anything. You just went, here's literally anything we filmed. Just have it. It's absolutely insane.
They should have called it the Snyder any old shit. That's basically what it was. It's just the only thing they cut were the Joss Whedon scenes. That's it. Everything else, throw a bloody in. Oh man, what a crock of crap.
Absolutely crazy. Yeah. If you find yourself with 4 hours of time and you haven't listened to our Bethesda special, I would recommend that over the Snyder Cut. But make your own choices. That's fine.
We're not here to judge.
Only judge a bit, that's okay. But anyway, that's everything we got this week. So until next time, if you want to catch us on social media, you can find us at Beat the Sheet on Twitter. Yeah, we're always posting on there about the latest games joining Game Pass, leaving Game Pass, any other kind of Game Pass news that comes up. You can find out about it first there. If you want to drop us an email, maybe just with some thoughts on the show or some feedback, you can find us at beatthesheetpodcast@gmail.com. And so until next time, I'm Andy Wood, and I've completed 68% of the sheet. Managed to regain 1% this week from beating all those new games.
And my name is Josh Stevenson, and I remain on 57% of the sheet because Unravel made me want to die, and therefore I just couldn't complete it despite really trying to. So maybe I'll get up to 58 next week.
I mean, it could be that, or it could be the fact that you spent a good part of your week completing Undertale, which you'd already beat. It's I completely understand why, but it's a lack of commitment to the challenge, Josh.
It's poor form.
I think you're going to have to do a back-to-back Unravel run now to make it up to the sheet.
Oh, God. Anything but.
Right then, anyway. So, thanks a lot for listening this week, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.